One of the most widely renowned composers of his time in the late 19th century, Debussy was the leading force for the development of new music. Though primarily composing works for the piano like Clair de Lune, as well as countless preludes, arabesques, and etudes, he is also commonly associated with writing pieces for symphonic orchestra such as La Mer and Iberia. All of his musical masterpieces have nevertheless stood the test of time and can still be appreciated today. A common theme in Debussy's music is expressing the beauty of nature, as can be seen in works like Reflections in the Water and Goldfish. Debussy's unique writing style allowed for him to connect and communicate easily with his audiences by including nuances of other famous composers' music in his own works. In this etude, which Debussy dedicated to Czerny, a writer of scales exercises for the piano, he begins the piece with a boring 5-note scale. The player, however, stops to briefly improvise, but then returns to the scale, purposely messing up as if annoyed by the piece. Suddenly, it moves into a faster, almost breakneck tempo with a wide variety of notes and a sense of freedom from old rules and regulations, thus further heightening Debussy's musical prestige over other artists for writing complex and intriguing works such as this musical parody. Debussy was born on the 22nd of August in the year 1862 into an era commonly known today as the Second Industrial Revolution, an age of heavy industry which replaced the pre-existing textile industry from the preceding Industrial Revolution. Materials created in forges at the time were put to good use, such as kitchenware, machinery, tools or parts, sometimes even automobiles, or trains. At the age of 5, Debussy and his mother Victorine were forced to flee from Saint-Germain-en-Laye, France, to his paternal aunt's house in Caen, in order to avoid the violence of the Franco-Prussian War. While taking lessons under his piano teacher there, Cerutti, a notable woman by the name of Mireille de Flaville took notice of Debussy's talents and soon allowed him to be admitted to the Paris Conservatoire. From there, after winning the Prix de Rome in 1884, Debussy received a full scholarship towards education at the French Academy in Rome, where he composed 4 pieces, eventually leaving to allow himself more freedom in composition. On the other hand, Debussy's personal life can be best described as complex and difficult to handle. He had countless affairs from the age of 18 and lost multiple friendships along the way. Debussy also had 2 wives, both of which were annulled, and one who attempted to commit suicide soon after. Towards the end of his life, Debussy suffered from rectal cancer. Surprisingly, during a German raid in the spring offensive of World War I, Debussy died from his condition instead of being killed by the soldiers, and was later buried with his second wife and only child, Claude Emma. The Fibonacci sequence, also known as the golden ratio, or the numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, so on and so forth, has been used for centuries throughout multiple cultures in sculpture, architecture, and most popularly in painting. By using the Fibonacci sequence, one is able to measure out a perfect, aesthetically pleasing golden rectangle, which when divided into squares and overlaid like this will form identical golden rectangles. Using this, you can see the extent to which artists went to make their work beautiful. In a similar way, if you take Debussy's piece Reflections on Water and you write it down like this, you will see that the 16th notes are grouped into 3s and that the climax of the phrase is on the 5th 16th note, in addition to the existing principles of stacking thirds to make chords, displaying the 4th and 5th numbers of the Fibonacci sequence. Is this coincidence? That additionally seconds, thirds, fifths, octaves, or single notes are the most pleasurable and repeated intervals in music? This is only one instance in one measure of Debussy's 141 works, but it definitely shows the level of dedication that Debussy put into making each one of his masterpieces. So, Debussy was important and affected the music that we hear today. How? Well, let's check him out just one last time. Claude Debussy, made famous from his exceptional musical talent, in fact so famous that it put his face on the 1980 20-franc banknote, was a revolutionary composer of his time, forming the transition between the late Romantic art style and the music of the 20th century. Though Debussy's musical works were associated with the Impressionism artistic movement, he strove to perfect his own unique style by creating harmony as the most pleasing sounds to the ear, using sequences such as the Fibonacci sequence, which allow his thoroughly complex music to be still appreciated today. Debussy's unique style directly went against the established harmonic rules from their Romantic period and their classical roots, sometimes even as musical parodies, and provided the basis for much of the music of the 20th century, even to the extent of creating the roots of some jazz music. What he composed at his time was nothing short of revolutionary, and provided precedent for future composers and artists to follow in his footsteps. Even though his familiar life outside of music was harsh and unforgiving, Debussy persevered and made his music nevertheless beautiful. In his works, artists to this day have sought out musical expertise and have always been satisfied with his aesthetic appeal, even enough to incorporate it into their own compositions. Here today, Debussy earns a seat amongst the greatest composers of all time. By revolutionizing the way that people see and write harmony and disregarding musical norms, however idealistic it was, even after being criticized and rejected by the great artists of his day like Tchaikovsky, he managed to better musical culture and the world as we know it forever.